Hello and welcome back to another episode of NT Movie Reviews, coming at you online and in print format at nativity.com, in podcast form at YouTube at NT Movie Reviews, and on all social media platforms at NT Movie Reviews. Today we are back with the Capsule Roundup coverage, our #2 roundup for the Seattle International Film Festival. After a few weeks, the festival is finally ending. I think we got 18 films and 9 interviews in the span of that time. So it a hugely successful festival in my eyes. Just had so many wonderful conversations with so many different filmmakers and got a chance to see so many films that I likely would not have been able to see otherwise. So it's just always such a wonderful festival that does shine a great light on international film, especially first-time filmmakers. It was just awesome. So, I didn't quite hit the extra 10 that I wanted. I didn't quite hit the number 20 this time around, but I think that the films I did see, largely I was a fan of almost everything. I'm not going to say that I know how to pick them, but my track record's pretty good when it comes to festival films. So, we'll just kind of jump right into it. One of the first ones that I got to speak with the director for as well, Jared Briley, his directorial debut, Evergreens, which is wrapping up coverage this week on the SIFF Online as well. And Spokane-based directorial debut featuring a treasure trove of local talent. Young Eve, played by Darby Lee Stack, and James, played by Edouard Philippont, comes of age as they road trip across Evergreen State in this Washington set love story. This, for fans of road trip movies, for fans of young love, to any bit of you that speaks to some of that Richard Linklater before series, this idea of two young people spending all this time together, kind of extending what might be otherwise, as you know, in Washington, Spokane to Seattle is not a long trip. But the fact that it stretches days just speaks to the kind of relationship that forms, and this idea of being courageous enough to leave the nest to take a shot on a stranger who you're starting to fall for. How they handle everything in the film is just so lovely, from the parental involvement and the worry that's naturally there. It speaks just to so many different aspects of growing up and not wanting life to pass you by. Darby Lee Stack, especially in this film, is huge standout. I think in some coming of age movies, romantic comedies, some of the line delivery can always read a little cheesy sometimes, depending on the movie, depending on the character. But there were so many things that she brought to the character that just stunned. You absolutely believe that she's falling for this guy. You understand what's kind of kept her at home and away from having experiences like others. I think it's one of the better performances that I've seen this year. She's certainly an actress to keep on your radar. It was great in her smaller bit in the holdovers as well. And the movie's just beautiful. For any fans of Washington State, the fact that you go from Eastern Washington to Western Washington, I think, is a great thing for audiences, because they just assume that everything is lakes, rivers, water, forest, and there's so much more to this state that the film really does touch on. So I really enjoyed that one. Had a great talk, like I said, with the director Jared Briley. You can check that out on our page as well. Another film I enjoyed to a large degree up until the end, is a film called Bitter Gold. In this pulse-pounding neo-western thriller set in the cutthroat artisanal mining industry in the deserts of northern Chile, 16-year-old Corolla must take control of the family business and stave off greedy, gold-seeking rivals after her father gets seriously injured. This was kind of a fascinating one. From the neo-western thriller, I was already like, okay, I'm in. Chilean mines, kind of getting gritty and dark in some of these areas. It could be quite thrilling. And aspects of the film really are, and a lot of what it ends up touching on is how people don't pay respect to women, number one. Even positions of authority, thinking that they might know better, or even though you are the one in charge, I don't have to listen to you because your father might not be here. There's a lot of tricky scenarios that sort of evolve from a conflict in the film. Where they start going with it is interesting. I just felt like at 83 minutes, it's a rare case where I was like, there's some movie missing here. The payoff at the end was not quite what I had hoped for. It starts to get interesting and go somewhere interesting, but I think it just cuts itself off just a little bit too short. And maybe it just didn't know how to end things in a satisfactory way for all the characters. But I largely enjoyed this. There's more than a couple performances in the film that are quite menacing. Catalina Sanchez, who plays Corolla, she's great in the movie. The acting is great, but just a little bit at the end. I don't know. I just needed a little bit more. And now, interestingly enough, a film that needed perhaps just a little bit less, or could have gone with a little bit less, as a film called The Salsa Vive, or Salsa Lives. This is a documentary. The rhythms, the passion, and energy of salsa, they do not recognize borders. Born in the vibrant streets of New York, it conquered and reigned in Cali, Colombia, featuring salsa legends like Ruben Blades, Henry Fiol. This illuminating journey shows how entire generations have celebrated their common identity through music and dance. Immediately when I saw a trailer for this film at the start of the festival, this was like a must see for me. I love music documentaries. I love a lot of Latin-based music. There's just so much life in the rhythm and all the different instruments. Growing up in Texas, I think certainly helped cultivate some of that as well. And so it's just always been music that I've been drawn to. And I've always, enjoyed dancing, whether it was in musicals or just, in the car, moving around a little bit. So the idea of a salsa film and getting to learn a little bit of the background, who some of the greats were, how it did move all around in Latin America, up to New York and back down, and having almost these different resurgencies at different places. It was really great. I think that narratively, there could have been perhaps just a little bit of arranging in the editing as far as who some of the characters were following, or maybe that you don't even know that we're kind of following until the very end. I love the message in the ending. I didn't quite know where it was going to be going sort of in the last 15 or 20 minutes. Moving away from more of the interviews and focusing more on some salsa dance competitions as well. But the dancing in the film is terrific, incredible music, incredible knowledge. Anybody who's a fan of music documentaries, this is an absolute must to keep your eyes out for. Just great music. Another terrific film that I got to see and had the pleasure of doing an interview for is a film called Ready or Not, directed by Claire Frances Byrne. What Katie and her mates think will be a carefree summer chilling out on their Dublin housing estate turns out to be more complicated when they push towards an adulthood they're ill-prepared for. This movie starts off so funny and so engaging in a way that taps into a lot of the fact that we don't really get to hear a lot of young female comedic voices in film. You think of all the characters who get to be silly and stupid and foul-mouthed, and a lot of the times they're men and young boys, and that women are just as foul-mouthed as guys are. So early on, there's this great aspect of seeing all these young girls slagging each other off, as the Irish would say. There's so much great slang and so many great phrases that they use in this. They're all 13, coming about in their maturity at different times and at different stages, sort of. But kind of midway through the film, it takes a little bit of a darker, more realistic turn as you watch how most of these kids are super ill prepared for sex, for conversations about sex, for consent, understanding what is appropriate and what's not, and how to stick up for your friends in so many cases. And there was this weird internal battle I had while watching it where I was like, it's very funny in so many ways, and there's so much drama in here. And because these are child actors who look their age, there's another aspect that just feels iffy and off, and it's not comfortable, and there's just something off there. And that really lends itself, I think, to how the film lands as a whole. This is a great story coming out of Ireland that's totally universal. Set in the late 90s, I think it's going to be accessible for anybody who watches it. Again, there's great humor. It touches on sex education, or perhaps the lack thereof. The conversation that I had with Claire is terrific. She is wonderful. She is so funny. It was a very spirited discussion, getting to learn a little bit more about Ireland and some of the filmmaking there, and then the stories that they're going to be telling coming out of there. So Ready or Not, for coming-of-age fans, I mean, this is Stand By Me-esque in that sense, again, that these are children that you're watching, and so you feel this worry for them. It just terrific debut. A film that had played Sundance that I'd heard a lot about is Josh O'Connor, coming off of Challengers, is really having his sort of run here, starring in, I want to say, 4 or 5 films just in the last year, and it doesn't look like it's going to be slowing down. So this rebuilding in Max Walker Silverman's tender follow-up to A Love Song, which won the SIFF 2022 Golden Space Needle Award for Best Performance. Josh O'Connor stars as a Coloradan cowboy who reconnects with his daughter and ex-wife after a wildfire takes his family ranch. This movie, especially when it debuted, I believe during Sundance, when California was experiencing all the wildfires down there, I remember seeing a lot about the film, a lot of reviews about it that maybe were a little bit influenced by what was happening in the world, but I think really helping put film critics in this mind of, you get out of the big hustle and bustle of the cities where most of us work, truthfully, near major cities. There's a real disconnect between the heartland of this country, between where ranches and farms and cowboys and cattle roam, and so much of what we eat and have dependent on everything is out there in a world that we are so far from, that we don't ever experience in some of these ways. And in California, when you've got a lot of rich people and you've got a lot of wealthy people and people everywhere in between who are losing homes, I think it's a situation that really grounds people a bit. And especially because of where it was, you're forced to think a little bit more about other people. And so watching this film for me was not as hard to access, having family down in Texas, a ranch down there, and understanding how devastating things like this can be to families and to these places. I thought the film, it was really tender more than anything. Somber, reflective. It really touches on aspects of how hard it is to keep and pay for a farm. The fact that you're really never making much money. It's one of the hardest industries to break even. For as hard as these people work, for as brutal as the labor is, the return on that you just don't see. And so it's really heartbreaking in a lot of ways, seeing the fact that the banks can't step in and help, or things are too much of a risk to step in and help in this natural disaster. And it poses a lot of questions about what is the right response when people lose everything. And so O'Connor's character is kind of living in this mobile home community with other people who have been displaced because of these fires. And at the time, again, he's reconnecting with his daughter, who wants to be living back in that ranch, or spending time that it just doesn't exist there. So there's a lot about legacy, and there's a lot about what it means to care for someplace and invest your time and your love into someplace like that too. There's a really great sort of relationship between him and his ex-mother-in-law in the movie as well. It's just very, very touching in a lot of ways. I think, one of those like 4 out of 5. I was waiting maybe for like an emotional gut finish, and there is a great resolution. But it was headed in that right direction. Really great performance. And again, I think just helps keep something in people's minds that maybe they forget about, or it's easy to dismiss because it doesn't directly affect you where you're at. And the film that closed out the Seattle International Film Festival, this is the second year in a row that we start with old ladies, and then second year in a row that we close with an A24 film. So that movie this year was Sorry Baby, directed and starring and written by Ava Victor. This is a non-linear serial comic story about a melancholic English professor's complicated path towards healing in the aftermath of an all-too-common tragedy. This was the winner of the Sundance 2025 Waldo Salt Screening Award. Sorry Baby was one that I'd heard much about, especially out of Sundance. Many fans of this story that touches on sexual assault, sexual abuse, perhaps misconduct, abuse of power and position. And in the nonlinear storytelling, you are kind of left guessing and sort of piecing together bits of her trauma, her life, and events that have happened to her, maybe that have exacerbated some of the intense emotions that she's felt, or some of the victimhood that maybe she's tried to avoid. And it raises a lot of questions, and not raises a lot of questions, but it just addresses the fact that for so many people, trauma is such a hard thing to talk about. And you might not even you don't want to see yourself as a victim. And you don't want people to look at you that way either. And there's this shame that comes around something that often was out of your control. And so in so many ways, the film does touch on those aspects in really beautiful and even fascinating ways that I think really help frame our perspective of understanding certain events too. But in some ways, you jump around multiple years. 1 or 2 years feel like they're 10 minutes of the movie, perhaps. And in the movie's, just a little over 100 minutes. There were just aspects of it where I was like, okay, we've spent a lot of time here with some of these characters, introducing some of these friendships and relationships from this college. And, a couple of them, really, there's a couple characters in the film that feel just a little forced, or that they're acting in a different film, in particular, just as it relates to maybe jealousy or envy. Just an interesting performance and character that's written in the film that kind of contrasts with Ava's character. I wasn't quite on board with everything there. I don't know. It gave an interesting taste in the mouth amid everything else that the film was kind of discussing. And then there's just moments where certain characters are there for a beat, and then they're gone, and then we're almost on to a whole other year. And there were just aspects where I felt you have an opportunity to try to dig into this a little bit deeper or cultivate more of an interaction with a character and express and open up a little bit more. And it just felt like after however many years, I'm not going to judge someone's journey and how they heal, but it felt like there was just opportunity for the character to grow in other ways, or at least grow in connection with other people. There's I don't want to say a pseudo love interest in the movie too, that it would have been nice to kind of explore a little bit more of that, or how she feels about aspects of that relationship given what's happening to her. So I don't know. I enjoyed it. I think it raises some great points. It is very effective in a lot of dramatic ways, but some of the characters or how they're treated are just a little bit thin, perhaps for the heaviness of what's going on in the rest of the story there. Again, this is a film that I believe won multiple awards. It won the Seattle Film Critics Choice Award. Had so many votes for it as the best film. I've seen a lot of film critics that I know calling this their best movie of the year. So this might be an agree to disagree, but I did enjoy the movie, and I think it will create, more than anything, a great conversation around it. Barry Jenkins producing it. It was interesting at the Q&A to hear a little bit more about how long the film has sort of been in development, and how they've sort of kind of gotten it going now. So Sorry Baby, it was good. It was good. I'm going to be very curious to see what a lot of people come out of it saying. A film that totally caught me by surprise just by how much I enjoyed it, and how relatable it was in some ways, and how good and bad, and just talking about shame and talking about secrecy and things that are really difficult. Twinless is the film, in this Portland set dark comedy from James Sweeney, 2019's crowd pleasing straight up. Two men, Dylan O'Brien and James Sweeney, trauma bond at a support group for people who've lost their twin. This was the winner of the Sundance 2025 U.S. Dramatic Audience Award, and I understand why. Director James Sweeney was actually in attendance for the festival and did a great Q&A after. I got to share some thoughts with him after the film as well. I'd heard a few fellow critics of mine who were very hot on this movie. There was controversy around it at Sundance because it was available streaming, and certain asshole critics were taking photos of nude scenes and sex scenes in the film and uploading them to Twitter. And so there's just a whole debacle that was going on around that, which I didn't even know until I got to the festival and was seeing the film. But the film, it's fascinating. Dylan O'Brien, my God, I have never seen a performance like this from him ever. Playing both aspects of this twin, the twin he loses, who is gay, the twin he does not, himself, who is straight. And in the case of this as well, James Sweeney's twin, who had passed, was straight, and he himself is gay. And so there's just this, from the get-go, this very interesting want to kind of understand the other person, or understand their twin perhaps a little better, especially in O'Brien's case, kind of tapping into, I didn't really know much about him, and I knew he was gay, but I don't know what a lot of that entailed, and I never asked him about things. And so the film is so therapeutic in so many ways, the way that these two guys kind of bond and become friends, and you've got really sweet and sincere moments of, hey, are you doing anything right now? Like, do you want to go get groceries with me? Because, again, after losing someone in your life, I can't imagine how hard it is to get up and go do the normal things that you have to do. And so where the film goes in so many directions just like blew my mind. I was not expecting how it ends up, where we even get in the middle of it. The film is so darkly funny in this way, and I've kind of described it as, it's not necessarily the new millennial humor, but I think as more people are getting comfortable sharing their trauma or just being shameless in their presentation of the fact that we all have dark thoughts, we all have fucked up thoughts. Maybe if we normalize that a little bit more, we can all laugh, because it's like, okay, cool, I'm not crazy and I'm not alone. There's so many moments or jokes in this film where it was like, that's so fucked up. But that is so funny at the same time. It's like offensively fun. Like, it's not offensive, but it just, I don't know. You're going to get what I mean when you watch this movie. I was like, jaw is on the floor. So many things that are being said here. The performances from Sweeney and O'Brien, two of the absolute best that I've seen this year. And again, the movie just deals so much with this feeling too of, can I be my authentic self? Who do I want to be? How can I share that with someone? You struggle with how you want others to see you as well. I just think that, whether for my life or for people's life, it's a very timely message. And just how everything is handled is so fantastic. It can't almost be put into words. It easily one of the best things I've seen this year by far. And ending on a high note, the last film we're going to talk about, another film that I had the opportunity to speak with the director of, Amy Wang, who killed it at Sundance with the South by Southwest Grand Jury Award. This is her feature debut about Chinese-American teen Joan Wong, who just wants to fit in at her high school. But when she hastily undergoes an experimental medical procedure to become Caucasian, the consequences can be devastating in this biting speculative fiction satire. From the moment I read that blurb, it was like, in, so in. From the name itself, from the name Slanted, and talking about a film that's going to have this transracial surgery, already I was like, okay, this is going to be dark, it's going to be kind of fucked up, but I bet you it's going to be confrontational, and it's going to be timely. And what do you want to know? I was right. The movie, I've heard some people compare it to Mean Girls in a sense, when you have this idea of, Joan's character wanting to run for prom queen when there's an opportunity for this. Black Mirror in the sense of, like, could there be a company that could do this? And I think it's really easy to throw those things out there. And at the core, though, is the story of this young girl who, when she came to America, is bullied and ridiculed and teased for so many things out of her control, to the point where, as Amy herself said when she was writing the film, what she tapped into was this feeling of, man, wouldn't it be easier, wouldn't my life be easier if I was white? Dealing with hate growing up in Australia as an Asian woman there, and seeing the wave of Asian hate that we've experienced in this country too. Amy really spoke about tapping into that and this feeling of, yeah, it's so fucked up what is happening that's out of my control, and how people are speaking to us or hating us and all these things. And she's like, that was, it took me back to that feeling in high school and in school. And so her story, so much of it is the inspiration for this tale. And that really comes through not only in the writing, but I think with the character development too, and where this almost sci-fi aspect of the film kind of kicks in with this idea of the surgery. But on top of all of that, you've got this baton pass from an Asian actress to a white actress through the middle of the movie. And they've got to maintain the same mannerisms. They are playing the same character under completely different circumstances. And, the film is funny, it's biting, it's heartbreaking in so many ways. There are just so many terrific performances throughout it. It does confront the audience in a way that I think is great. Talking with Amy, I think we both kind of said we resonate more with darker, more grounded, and realistic films. Again, it doesn't always have to be dark, but films that don't shy away from touching on realities that we face in society or that people face in society. So Slanted was just fucking awesome. The conversation with Amy was terrific. She is just the coolest person too. And in speaking with her, really so much of what happens in the film, just resonated even more. And again, this is where these first or second time feature filmmakers who are writing what they know, so many of these films just end up touching me, resonating in a way that a lot of what we're getting in Hollywood doesn't these days. Stories matter, people matter, great scripts matter. That's really going to do it for our SIFF 2025 coverage. It has been, like I said, a great, great time. You can listen to all of the interviews on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, even on TikTok. Exactly where you're going to find this video here. So you can expect in the next week here that we'll get back to some regularly scheduled broadcasting. We're going to have the Mission Impossible conversation, The Final Reckoning, It Has Been Seen. There's more of the Tim Robinson's Friendship. There'll be some thoughts on that as well here. Mountainhead, I think, just came out on HBO Max. So there'll be more than a few things that we're going to discuss here next week. But for now, make it a point to go check out some of these films when you can, if you can, and remember to support independent film. Thanks again. You can find us, as always, NT Movie Reviews. Take care. Thanks again for listening.